Who are the greatest Cincinnati Bengals of all time? Today we're going to find that out. Starting off at number 10 with Carlos Dunlap. Finished his career with exactly 100 sacks. Key member of the dominant Bengals defense in the mid 2010s. Two-time Pro Bowler, certainly deserving of being on this list. At number 9, Corey Dillon, one of the better running backs of the late 90s, early 2000s. Sometimes an empty calorie stat player, but nonetheless very good. All but his last season with the Bengals, he had 1,100 yards each time. Certainly the greatest running back in franchise history, the all-time leading rusher in the history of the Cincinnati Bengals. At number 8, we're going to go with the best offensive player of that 2010s era. That would be A.J. Green, seven-time Pro Bowler, two-time second-team All-Pro selection. Should have been a first-team All-Pro selection, in my opinion, in 2015. Some of the best hands and some of the best route running abilities in the league during that era. At number 7, we're going to go with the best defensive player on that team during that same era. A lot of players from the mid 2010s. The Bengals were really good during that time. That would be Geno Atkins. Finished his career with 75 sacks. He was a two-time first-team All-Pro selection, one of the best interior defensive presences during the mid-2010s. Eight-time Pro Bowler, in my opinion, should be in consideration down the line for a Hall of Fame bid. Certainly, no, not a first ballot Hall of Famer, but I think the senior committee should consider his case as far as just a Hall of Famer. At number 6, we're going to go with the 1988 NFL MVP. That would be none other than Boomer Esiason. Led the league in all passing yards at that point, and certainly one of the better passers in Bengals franchise history. Was critical in helping the Bengals get to their second Super Bowl in franchise history, but was a little bit overrated as a passer. I don't think his numbers hold up the same against some other all-time Bengals franchise players. At number 5, one of those players would be one of the most underrated players in NFL history, none other than Ken Riley. Finished his career with 65 all-time interceptions. Only was a Pro Bowler 3 times in his career. Despite that, All-Pro 1 time in his career, and that was, I think, his second to last year. But still one of the best ball-hawking cornerbacks of the 70s. A little bit overrated now because of his cover skills, but nonetheless did not get enough credit at that time for how good of a cover cornerback he was. Maybe not as good as, say, a Mel Blount or Willie Brown, but certainly should have gotten a lot more accolades than he did. Ken Riley is one of the greatest Bengals of all time, and he comes in at number 5. Number 4, I'm going to go with Willie Anderson, one of the greatest primes in the history of the Bengals, helping them in the mid 2000s. Three-time first-team All-Pro selection, four-time Pro Bowl, one of the best right tackles of the 2000s. And there's a good case for him to be a Hall of Famer down the line as far as the senior committee decision goes. At number 3, we're going to go with Chad Johnson, or otherwise known as Chad Ochocinco. If anyone saw those Leon Sandcastle, Jerry Rice cake ads with Deion Sanders and Jerry Rice back in the day, Chad Johnson, a.k.a. Chad Ochocinco, was kind of a real-life version of that. He could really do anything. One of the greatest route runners of all time. Finished his career with 11,000 receiving yards, multiple-time Pro Bowl and multiple-time first-team All-Pro selection. Well deserving of a Hall of Fame bid. He comes in at number 3. At number 2, we're going to go with Ken Anderson. I don't think this guy gets talked about nearly as much as he should. The all-time leading passer in the history of the Bengals for a reason. Helped them remain relevant in the mid-70s, one of the greatest offensive players, one of the greatest and most efficient deep ball passers in the history of the game. And then finally got a coach who can help the Bengals contend in the 80s, took them to a Super Bowl in 1981, almost knocking off the 49ers, won MVP that year and well deserving of that award. Although personally, I think Ronnie Lott should have won. He definitely had a great year and was the best quarterback in the league that year. Ken Anderson comes in at number 2, but number 1 had to be the greatest tackle of all time, the greatest blindside tackler of all time, a guy who got coached by Forrest Gregg, one of the greatest tackles of all time, to be the greatest left tackle of all time. That would be none other than Anthony Munoz. Played 15 seasons, 9-time first team All Pro selection. Um, Only allowed 15 sacks his entire career. Never allowed a sack to Bruce Smith in his career. And they played quite a few times. They played something like 8 or 9 times in their career. Never allowed a sack to Bruce Smith, who's the all time leading sack artist in the history of the NFL, which is very, very impressive. Anthony Munoz is the greatest Cincinnati Bengal of all time.